For the past few years, Doctor Who has come under fire for one common criticism: it's too politically correct. Since Jodie Whittaker's casting as the Doctor, people have been complaining that the writers have been using political correctness as a focus on their stories. These forms of criticisms don't just surround Whittaker's casting, but also other issues such as race, depiction of political characters, and ecological issues. However, some people may not realise this, but political correctness has always been a major part of Doctor Who prior to the current series. When Whittaker was first cast as the Doctor, there was a lot of backlash to the idea of the Doctor being played by a woman. Loads of fans gave very negative thoughts towards her casting, while other fans and people who have worked on the show have been very supporting with her casting, with Peter Capaldi, the previous Doctor, saying, "I just don't understand what the problem is. I just don't get it. Also, I think if you're a fan of Doctor Who, you should relate to its message of kindness and understanding and openness." But the idea of the Doctor being a woman has been going on for a very long time. One instance was in the 90s after Doctor Who was cancelled in 1989. A comic relief special called The Curse of Fatal Death was released in 1999, featuring as the Doctor, Rowan Atkinson, Richard E. Grant, Jim Broadbent, Hugh Grant, and Joanna Lumley, 18 years before Whittaker was the Doctor. The whole thing was a joke, as it was a comic relief special where the Doctor would regenerate different times in the last few minutes of the special. But the idea of the Doctor being a woman was supported long before the series was revived back in 2005. Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor, once said, having established that the Doctors could change, that they could transmogrify into another aspect of this particular character, then there was no real limit to the number of Doctors, or the sex of the Doctors, or the race of the Doctors. And Tom Baker said around the time he was finishing being the Doctor, "I wish my successor, whoever he or she might be, with the best of luck." And in 2017, before Whittaker's casting, "I think it might be quite nice to have a woman as the Doctor." Remember, some of the biggest franchises are driven by strong female characters. Alien, another science fiction franchise, was originally led by Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver. Many consider her to be one of the greatest movie characters of all time. The Tomb Raider video game franchise, the protagonist is Lara Croft, one of the most recognizable names in video game history. Yeah, she started as more of a sex symbol, but recently went through a series where her being a sex symbol wasn't necessary. And recently, the sequel trilogy in Star Wars showed Rey being a strong female character, starting as a scavenger on Jakku in The Force Awakens, then was training to be a Jedi in The Last Jedi, and to becoming a Jedi by The Rise of Skywalker. In episode 3 of Series 11, we were introduced to Rosa Parks, the woman who refused to give her seat to a white man on a bus. It also has the Doctor's companions. Ryan has experienced the racism that was happening at the time, with Ryan being slapped in the face for trying to return a woman's glove to her, and later in a restaurant he gets called a Negro. Similarly, Yaz gets called a Paki. But Doctor Who has had companions witness the racism of different times before. 10th Doctor companion Martha Jones experienced multiple cases of racism in the two-part story Human Nature and the Family of Blood in 2007, one of them coming from the character of Joan Redfern, played by Jessica Hines, who didn't believe that a woman of colour was training to be a doctor. And in 2017's Thin Ice, Bill is referred to as a creature by the character of Sutcliffe, which he is then punched in the face by the Doctor. Arachnids in the UK featured probably one of the worst characters in the show's history, Jack Robinson, played by Chris Noth. The character is essentially a parody of Donald Trump, with Trump even being mentioned in the episode. Around 30 years before this episode, there was The Happiness Patrol, a story that was intended to be a parody of Margaret Thatcher, with the character of Helen A, played by Sheila Hancock, a direct parody of Thatcher. And before we were trying to leave the European Union and Brexit was happening, we were trying to join the Union And The Curse of Peladon in 1972 is a story that dealt with this. The planet of Peladon represented the United Kingdom, while the Galactic Federation represented the European Union. As Sylvester McCoy, the Seventh Doctor, once said, it was about the stories of the times. Do you know which books and films are inspired by World War I? It's The Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien served in World War I and used his experience as inspiration when writing these books. Each battle in each book and film represents the war took place in a different setting, and Mordor was inspired by the trenches in No Man's Land. One of the most hated episodes in recent years was Orphan 55 from the last series, a story that is set on Earth in the future that was damaged by pollution and climate change, and humanity were turned into creatures called the Dregs. Climate change is a big issue at the moment because we've got people such as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin who don't believe that climate change is real. The majority of stories with ecological issues in Doctor Who have come from the 70s. The second story with John Pertwee, the third Doctor, and of the 70s, Doctor Who and the Silurians, dealt with the titular Silurians waking up from tests of an underground neutron reactor. Inferno, later that year, focused on a group of scientists working on a drilling project that unleashes a gas that turns them into werewolves known as Prime Lords. And The Green Death in 1973 featured environmental advocates trying to protect the Earth while giant maggots emerged onto the scene. But the most politically correct thing about Doctor Who isn't Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, it's the Daleks. The Daleks were created by Terry Nation in 1963, and they were inspired by the Nazi political party. Stories such as their first appearance, the Daleks, and Genesis of the Daleks are filled with Nazi references. Specifically in Genesis, the Khaleds, the Daleks before they became mutated into squids, do Nazi-like salutes, and Davros, the creator of the Daleks, provides their enemies, the Thals, a chemical that can destroy the Khaled dome, and then orders the Daleks to kill one of the Khaled scientists, deceiving that he is the real traitor. This is depicting Davros as a fascist leader, like how fascist leaders will destroy their own people for power and to stay in office. Unlike the previously mentioned characters that parody political people, the Daleks were created almost 20 years after World War II ended, and the Nazis went with it. The Nazis aren't just inspiration for the Daleks. Back to Star Wars, George Lucas, creator of the franchise, intended to make the Galactic Empire as close to the Nazis as he could, using violence to achieve the goals that they set out and their desires for totalitarian order. Even in their uniform is similar to the Nazis. Political correctness hasn't been a problem with the current series of Doctor Who, because political correctness has always been a part of the show since its beginning. The idea of the Doctor being a woman has been going around for a long time, and The Green Death and Orphan 55 deal with ecological issues. And other politically correct parts that weren't mentioned include the Cybermen represent organ transplants, which were introduced in the 60s, and LGBTQ characters such as Captain Jack Harkness being introduced in the revived series. Doctor Who is one of the most politically correct shows of all time.